So this afternoon we're talking about climate change, the adaptation of camels and the adaptation to camels. So I'm sitting here with Prame Lesorogol, who is my camel manager and also long-term friend. We've known each other for 30 years.
Over 30 years.
Over 30 years,
Yes.
yeah. I'm forgetting, as you know. And we've worked together for many years. Prame was the main researcher when I was doing my PhD work on the camel milk production. So although the PhD is in my name, this is the man who really knows the nitty-gritty. So we wanted really to discuss a bit more about, everybody's talking about climate change. It's the subject or the topic of the present time. And camels fit into that discussion quite nicely. We went through itemizing the different adaptations that camels have this morning. And I just want to say a little bit more about it, and then Prame can also tell us about, from his side and from his community side, what changes have been happening over the decades and the years, and the story about the camel coming into Samburu. But this morning I was talking about, yes, camels are superbly adapted to climate change. They, in that respect, in terms of adaptation, they certainly are one of the animals of the future. If we want to continue producing good, nutritious, healthy milk. But on the mitigation side, I think we do need to do more research, because as the world becomes more industrial, the role of the camel perhaps may lose its role. It's a very good food producer in highly climatic variable countries. But as we become more industrialized, the pressure is on just to produce meat, milk as much as possible. Doesn't matter what the quality is. Maximum intensification. And that, I feel, is a worry, because the camel may lose out, because we're not going to be able to produce the volumes that cows do. Not if we're going to continue this natural grazing system and the healthy production of milk. And also about mitigation, they do take a long time to mature. So it's very slow to get to your milk production stage. And this is where we may have a disadvantage with these big industrialized farming systems, and who produce so much milk, and they grow their cattle very quickly so that they're producing milk within 3 years. Our camels will only produce milk after 5 years. So they're giving off this methane for 5 years, when a cow is probably only producing methane for 4 years until it gets its first milk. And that's a disadvantage. But again, camels do produce about 10 times the volume of milk of the local Samburu cattle. So we have an advantage there in terms of the efficiency, but not in terms of the lifetime emissions. So I'm really keen to start looking in how can we speed up the mitigation aspects of camels and do more research, really to see how they're going to compare against other species. And that is really going to be through looking at artificial insemination, which has not been successful in camels. Nobody's mastered it, even in the Middle East, with the millions of dollars available. Artificial insemination still doesn't succeed. And then also embryo transfers, which do work. They've been mastered in the Middle East, particularly in terms of racing camels. But why not look at the milk? And particularly if we can do research on the semen production and the storage of semen, looking at sexed semen, so that you can select the semen from a bull which is only going to produce female calves. So you don't then have to wait longer to get a female calf being born, brought up to reproducing age and the milking stage. It would really take out a lot of that time, because instead of having a 50-50 chance of having a male or a female calf, if it's sex semen, you can pretty much guarantee it'll be a female every offspring. So those are ways we could really make them fit into the future and maybe overcome some of the hesitation I have about saying the camel is the best climate change animal. Because we do have these slight issues with mitigation aspects. But Prame, you've been living in this environment, 60 years now,
Yes,
like
60
me?
years now, yes.
You've seen many changes and you've been very much involved in camels, including research, and you've done a lot of your own sociological research with your sister-in-law and published articles and research papers. What are your thoughts on climate change and camels and what's been happening around you?
Well, thank you, Piers. To start with, when I was first employed in Farm Africa, I joined Farm Africa as a data collector, and that gave me, to interact with the camel owners, because I go around asking camel questionnaires. I go to camel keepers and I do ask questionnaires. We had a survey, and which was a very detailed survey, ask about camel husbandry, the importance of camels, the origins of camels, and also the important and the future needs of camels. Then that gave me a chance to learn a lot about the camels. Actually, the first 2 years gave me, build my, my knowledge about the camels. Then it came to when we started to do research. We were doing camel research, especially camel milk research on milk, intensively. That also enabled me to learn a lot about camel, and also interacting with the people who have camel knowledge, like the Somali, Bush Sheikh, or the Kane. Actually, I learned a lot from them, and I learned, like stereotype and where the camel come from and all that. And when we had the workshops, we also bring farmers together, camel keepers together, and we do a workshop, a participatory workshop, whereby we share the knowledge about camels. And then camels were few that time, but it was a good time in Samburu County, because it was just the end of 1984 drought, and Samburu were primarily cattle keepers. But the neighboring Samburu, the neighboring Rendile Samburu, they saw the Rendile are not struggling, getting food, because, when other livestock moved for a search of pasture, the Rendile is still comfortable living away from, the other species, but they live with their camels, and they still get the food like milk, blood, and even water. They bring water from far away, because they use it as a pack animal. So that time now, Farm Africa intervened, and they started, workshops, and the Samburu community now started to learn about camel, and they started to have, think of changing from cattle keepers to camel culture. And actually many people, changed to keep camels instead of other livestock.
This is amongst your Samburu community?
Among our Samburu community. So, but the problem that time was like, no one wanted to sell camels. They can sell male camels, but they don't sell female.
Sure. It's a bit like us today.
Yes.
Have we changed?
So what they did is when my daughter get married, the first dowry is a camel heifer.
Okay.
So the bride, the bride have to, the groom, I mean,
The groom,
the
yeah.
groom have to find a way of getting a female heifer.
Mm-hmm.
Although it did not encourage them from raid, but they had to go
Yeah.
long distances like Marsabit, Kor or Kargi to, get camels. Then people started now to get camels, and from Africa intervened, and they started to give even people camels, heifers. You buy heifers, and then they give them a breeding bull to breed their animals. So that's how Samburu got camels, and many of them now keep camels. Until recently, when the first governor of Samburu, when he was in the university, he was on attachment to Farm Africa,
Okay.
and he learned the importance of camel rearing. And when he became the governor, he said, "Oh, now this is an opportunity now to make food self-reliance, to make people food security, especially in the lowland." So he started to purchase camels, especially from the Somali community, neighboring Somali community, because they have they sell camels, not like Renili. Renili, I think it was almost a taboo to sell a female
Interesting.
camel.
Yeah.
But Somali sells female camels, and they continue buying camels actually in big numbers. They even, one time they bought about 1,000 heifers, and they given them the lowland region of Samburu. And now that one is continuing up to date. Even I think in the month's time, they are going to give another 1,000 camels to
Are they?
Samburu community.
Yeah. I've heard they've given about, what, 7,000 or 8,000 camels
Yeah.
over the last few years?
Yes, for the last few years, they have given a lot of them, and all those camels are there. So I'm sure people are now benefiting out of that, and even the highland place, like the Lorogi Plateau, they're also acquiring camels now. They want to have camels because
Sure.
they have seen the importance of camels. Yes, about the camels itself, camels have a huge adaptation. Like when I went to work in Botswana for camel ecotourism, that's a government camels. They closed a 5,000 acre area, and they keep all those camels there.
And they belong to the government, do they?
It belongs to the government, but they have handed over to the community. But they still, like intervene. They still, support them by, finding expertise from outside, like how I went there. So when I went there, it was summer. It was hot, and camels were no hairs, and they have given birth like in big number. So we continued until around June, July, and camels, it's getting cold, and camels started to grow hair.
Okay.
And long hair, and food was like no food. And that time during summer, the camels were fat, big, even cows are big. And I think they are putting a lot of, reserve food, fat on their body. And during winter, all the plants are dry.
Okay.
So camels are like hardly eating, anything. And most of the time, because it is cold, they are just sitting down. And they survive the whole winter.
Wow.
For about 4 months. So camels
Amazing.
have
So they build up reserves when the times are good.
And I think, yes, I don't know, maybe they have learned that over time. And they know during the summer, they just put a lot of fat.
Interesting.
Because they know winter is coming.
Where did Botswana get their camels from originally?
It was, originally it was police camels
Okay.
to patrol Pashona land,
Mhm.
Pashona land. So it was government property, and
Okay.
after now the civilization, they got independent, and they, they got cars, nice roads. So there's no need of keeping
No
camels.
purpose
So
anymore.
actually, camels went back to wild.
Semi-wild animals.
Semi-wild
Sounds very
animals.
similar to the situation in Australia,
Yes,
where camels were imported in the 1800s to help build the railway line.
yes,
Once the railway line had been made and the roads established,
yeah,
the camels were released into the bush,
yeah,
and now they're considered as a problem. They're being shot
yes.
as vermin, and
Yeah.
but it's good to hear that Botswana is using them for tourism.
Actually, it was so likely.
And
Yeah,
Yeah, no, they're very adaptable. I mean, if
Yeah.
you look at camels, you even have the dromedary camel like we have, is living in some of the highland areas of Pakistan and India,
Mhm.
where it gets cold and snowy. So they are very
But they can
adaptable
still-
to
they can
to
still
climate.
survive,
They
yeah.
still survive, yeah.
Okay.
Not their well, I guess it is their natural environment now
Yeah.
because they are adaptable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So generally camels have a very big range of adaptation, even including the behavior, how people behave to they can become friendly, they can be easily domesticated. I think maybe one of the animals can easily get domesticated
Yeah.
because they can adapt. They are
Yeah, I
smart
mean they're
animals.
quite big,
Yes.
so a lot of people are afraid of them.
Yes.
But when you actually realize the potential of the camel and the fact if you treat it well and you respect it as a productive animal,
Yeah.
then they're incredibly friendly. As
Yeah.
you can see, I mean you've been a great contributor to making sure our camel herd
Yeah.
is what it is today.
Yes.
And virtually anybody can go in, even like the young children today can go in and milk,
Yes. And they are
whereas
not
in a lot of animals that would not be possible.
Yes.
Even with a lot of camel herds it wouldn't.
Mm.
But you have this natural way
Yes.
that
I think camels
makes them calm.
They can even easily learn your psychology.
I think so.
Like when
Yeah.
you go, when we pass camel, you don't scare, come, hello,
Yeah.
and then they say, this is so and so.
Sure.
And
Yeah, they
yes,
reckon. I'm sure they recognize
even kick you.
voices.
Yes.
And I always say to people, for me they're like therapy.
Oh yes.
I come here, I immerse myself, and all my problems go away.
My goodness, that is actually happened to Samburu elders.
Mhm.
They were initially they were cattle keepers, but when they introduced camels in their boma, the one I was interviewing when we were doing a survey,
Mhm.
they say, oh, nowadays I don't even go to cattle boma.
Mhm.
When in the evening I just go to camel boma.
Okay.
Like it's like therapy. Yeah.
So it's the same.
So, yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, that's maybe another future for them.
Yes.
Yeah, helping mankind solve its own problems.
Yes.
No, I find that very true, and we need to get that to get into Maasai land and these other places, because
Yes.
in Maasai land they blame the drought. They blame the camel for bringing droughts to Maasai land,
Mm-hmm.
because my interpretation is that in a drought, even camel areas may have less food. So people migrate
Yes.
into other counties and other tribal areas where there is good camel food.
Yes.
And because in Maasai land, which is a cattle community, there's very little grass, but there is a lot of bush.
Yes.
So it's obviously a good place for camels to go.
Mm.
And so what happens is the camels move down there in the dry seasons, in the droughts, not because they're bringing drought, but simply because drought has driven them
Mm-hmm.
to
go
areas
to
where
a
there's still good resources for them.
Correct.
So it'd be great if we could work more with the Maasai, convince them that they're not the harbingers of drought.
Mm.
I've even had camels hamstrung in Maasai land when I kept them there for 10 years.
Yes.
Because people felt that they were a bad omen, so they cut their ligaments at the back of the feet,
Wow.
and so
Sorry.
it died,
Yes.
slaughtered.
Mm.
But again,
I
carry
agree,
on.
because the feeding habit of camels, they don't concentrate on one place like
Mm.
what cattle do. They concentrate and they eat in a one place and they can clear the area in a short while. But camels are so spread. They don't like, they just go one plant and they go around the plant, make sure that, you know, we are not to concentrate on one area. So they have that adaptation.
Yeah. There's like snacking on it.
Yes.
Snack here, snack there.
Snack, yes.
They move on.
Yes.
Very little permanent damage.
Yes.
At least here,
yeah.
I believe in parts of the Middle East where you've got animals, and this is even why in Australia people are complaining. If they're really confined by fences or cities, and they will have to eat what is there.
Yes.
And if they don't have room to roam and move, or unless people are going to feed them, then they can be damaging.
Yes.
But I would say over 90, probably 95% of their distribution over the world, they're probably still very environmentally friendly in that respect.
Mm. So that is actually about camels, and
Yeah.
We can talk a lot about the camels. Like you remember when you are doing research, when we are doing your PhD research, you know, we intensively did a lot about the camels.
We found out a lot as well.
A lot, yes.
I remember, and we also exchanged a lot of stories. We used to do 24-hour suckling observations.
Yes, that was tedious.
To see how often, it was very tedious, but you managed to make it fun.
Yeah.
To see how often a camel calf would suckle naturally from the day it was born up until the day it was weaned after a year.
Yeah.
And we'd have to follow the animals during the day, in the heat of the day, and all the thorns and the wasps and the bees and whatever. And then at night sit up trying to stay awake all night.
You said 24 hours of milk observation.
Yeah.
It was 48 hours.
48 hours, okay.
Yeah, because the first thing we do is we milk from the evening until morning. We continue milking whenever the calves suckle during the day. That is until evening. That is 24 hours.
Yeah, yeah, it's true.
And then tomorrow we just, the following evening, we just observe whenever the calf wishes.
Yeah, that's true. We were milking and then watching when without milking.
Yes.
And I remember one evening a lion jumping into the boma, totally disrupting all of that 48 hours of work, because every calf jumped up. And obviously then the mothers jumped up and they suckled, which wouldn't normally have perhaps happened. So all sorts of stories, and we learnt a lot.
Yeah,
we did, and a lot of what Farm Africa did was, I think, pioneering. Because we were both Dr. Chris Field, who was a mentor to both of us, basically. Yes. He was my external supervisor on my PhD.
Okay.
And a great camel expert, and we learned a lot from him. He and many of us, Dr. Lusigi, Dr. Rutagwenda, Guruntsitsa, Sylvester Machete, all sorts of scientists, Hugh Lamprey, Arivan Kekum, Elizabeth Bakker, all were doing different research on different components of the northern rangelands in Marsabit. And we were looking at the impact of the livestock, and do they really cause desertification? And so we had researchers looking at sheep and goats, donkeys, camels, cattle, and basically what Farm Africa did was they took all of the research findings over, must have been about 8 years of research, and out of that research there was a Marsabit county management plan designed, but never really implemented. So Farm Africa used all of that research results to then do development, not so much at the high county level or the government level, but much more at the community level.
Yes.
And we moved with our herd of demonstration camels. We lived in tukels like this, in the bush it went for what, 12 years, that project?
Yes.
All over Samburu, Marsabit, dodging raiders and predators and diseases.
Yes.
But it was a wonderful experience, and the people, again, because we were living in an open environment like this, it was like an open manyatta, an open door. People would come and go.
Actually, people appreciated us because I think we are learning from them. We live with them. We are not like we have a different culture. Like when we moved to Turkana community, we live like Turkana community.
Yeah.
when we go to Gabra land, we live like a Gabra. So
Yeah.
we suit every.
Very true. And
every
we weren't,
need.
for the first few years, we weren't mechanized. We were walking everywhere with the camels.
Yeah,
We weren't just driving through villages,
yeah.
passing through. We were actually living with communities
Furthermore,
and
we used to
learnt a
do
lot.
what we call SOS. That
Yeah.
is, what is it called? Outreach services.
Special outreach services,
Special
yeah.
outreach services, whereby we go with our camels, we carry medicines with our camels, and go
Human
and
medicines,
human medicine,
animal
live with-
medicines,
animal
yeah.
medicine, live with the people outside, even our camp. So we did a lot during Farm Africa time.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And I think Farm Africa, made a big impact to the camel culture.
No, I'm sure.
Yes.
And again, like you're saying with the Samburu now, it's very strong.
Yes.
You said something interesting. The Rendili. Yes, you're right. They never sell female camels.
Yeah.
Because that is their future survival mechanism.
Yes.
In the days we were doing our research,
Yeah.
they were mostly drinking blood and milk
Yeah.
and meat. There was maize meal, but very few vegetables. And I remember, well, I used to drink blood and milk myself, as you still do occasionally.
Yeah.
And Prame also looks after tours of school children coming to learn about
Oh yeah.
about different cultures, and he will take them through, even to the extent of slaughtering a goat.
Yeah.
And those that are brave enough drink the blood with him
Sure. Yes.
and help slaughter it. You take them following the animals through the
Yes.
bush.
Mhm.
But when I last visited Rendili, earlier this year actually, we went to a big market, and for the first time ever, I saw a very beautiful female Rendili heifer
Yes.
for sale in the market.
Yes.
And they were asking a high price, but I said to them, I've never seen this. This is against your culture, your traditions. It's taboo.
Mm-hmm.
And they explained that camels are the only animals that still survive the drought,
Yes.
because we've just been through a 2.5-year drought, which ended earlier this year.
Yeah.
And many of those Rendili families had no other animals left except for their camels.
Okay.
And so this family in particular explained they'd been forced to bring a female heifer to the market because they wanted to restock. And the
okay.
quickest way to rebuild your herd
Yeah.
is not to sell a camel as such, but to exchange a camel with 20 or 30 goats,
Oh yes. Okay. Yes.
because that's the sort of the exchange rate.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were forced to bring one of their favourite camels only because they had to recover from drought.
To do the
And so they were
trade
going to
with the-
exchange it with 30 young female goats,
Yes.
if they could find a buyer who had that number of goats.
Yeah.
So it was like a barter exchange.
Yeah.
And then the goats, of course, you can get 2 kids a year.
Yeah.
They grow rapidly. You can sell them much more easily.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the quick way. That's why camels are very good at resilience.
Yeah.
Not only because they survive the drought, but because they're also
You can-
that stock where you can rebuild rapidly
Yeah.
by exchanging one for goats.
Yeah. I guess. In the future, people were used to live, and they used to not to send children to school. So their demand, their requirements were a bit low, and I think the reason why they are looking for other alternatives like getting small stock is it is easy for them to sell a small
Sure.
stock for school fees and other household needs
Yeah,
rather than selling a camel. So it's
sure. No, it is. It's multi-purpose.
yes, it's a multi-purpose. Yeah.
And I also remember when we were doing our research, trying to get a few Gabra camels to compare the milk yields of the Somali camels we had, the Turkana camels we had. But we couldn't, for the life of us, find Rendili or Gabra camels. And I went to negotiate, and I spent a night in a Gabra village in the Chalbi. And the father wanted to sell me a heifer, but the son didn't. And it was nearly bloodshed.
Yes.
The young man was threatening to kill his father. I just had to say, sorry,
I'm
don't
not
really,
buying it.
I'm not desperate. And even there in the Gabra, it's still so strong.
Okay.
And
Tell me, how did you get the 24 heifers from Turkana?
yeah,
I remember
another
you-
long story,
Yeah.
yes. I was living in Baragoy,
Yeah.
and we got together a team of Turkana people from that side, and we drove across the Suguta Valley to southern Turkana, a place called Lakori, and we spent about 2 or 3 weeks trying to buy camels, and we were partially successful. We were hoping to get at least 30 camels, but I think we got about 24 in the end.
I remember 24.
And in the end, to tell you the truth, we were actually thrown out of the county because one of the politicians said, no, you shouldn't be, he was telling the elders, you shouldn't be selling your female camels outside, again, because of the same importance.
So it's also against the
so, but they do sell. I mean, they're willing to sell, but it was a difficult time, and we then had to take the 24 we had, walk back across the Suguta, which is, okay, I didn't do that. I drove, but the people who were with me walked them across.
The camels,
They arrived safely. It was about a week's walk through one of the hottest places, and often, as you know, a very highly insecure area. So again, I think we were lucky to get that herd together, and we have learnt a lot from that. Different breeding experiments.
Okay.
Okay, had enough?
Yeah, that's 20 minutes.
Sure.
So I just want to ask a question.
Sure.
Any vital points that you can touch on? Because you have talked about the points, but in story form, which is not bad. But maybe if there's something you feel like you've left out, because again, we don't have too long content.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So I'll try and say something short.
Okay.
I often wonder where the future of the camel will be, because we strongly believe in a lot of the traditional benefits of the camel, and yet as a business we're trying to be commercial, to make money by selling the milk. And I really wonder, and I actually think the strength of the camel is it is a very good drought reserve for rural pastoral families. Not only pastoral families, but anybody living in the deserts, because they continue to produce milk even in the worst drought. And yet commerce and business is pushing us to try and maximize the yield. And that's not really the role of the camel. The camel itself, it has a long lactation. It doesn't get pregnant until it rains after the drought. So it means you get milk all the way through the drought, even if it's 2 years.
Until you do pre-separation.
Okay, and do pre-separation. But in a drought, nobody would want to do that because they're desperate for the milk. So it's going to be interesting to see where the future lies. Yes, there's the climate change arguments, and I think that's, overall, I think it's positive for the camel, although I repeat, I really want to do more research on the mitigation aspects. I believe there is potential to really make it superlative. But also, it's so important to those traditional families. We don't want to take it all away from what it's evolved to do. And the camel has evolved over millions of years to adapt and to be suitable to hostile climates. And so we'll see, it's going to be a careful balance. Obviously the camel is not the whole solution to the world's problems, but it's got a very strong role, which I think will continue, but maybe will get squeezed into smaller and smaller areas. What do you think?
If I may say, in my Samburu community, culture is, it was initially food security, about food security. Like when other livestock are not producing milk, camels can still produce milk. And now people are moving from just looking at food security, like getting milk, meat, and blood. Now we are commercialized. We are commercializing.
We're money oriented.
Money oriented. And now the problem is the government even focus more on other species, and they are not focusing, or they are not put effort on camel on money oriented, like selling their products
Yeah.
and skins, like skin, hides and skin, and even milk.
Sure.
Yeah, we have KCC, we have many milk cooperatives, but not camel
Sure.
milk cooperatives.
I think you're right. I mean,
Yes.
the products from the camel,
Yeah.
the milk, the leather, are all very valuable,
Yes,
and yet it's never really been supported, and it's been left to individuals to try and bring all of that milk together from wide open areas over long, long distances.
yes,
And so it has been difficult, and there hasn't really been enough support to
yeah.
try and streamline that delivery system. It's the transport system and delivery system to the market, which
Yes.
is one of the challenges. So let's see where we go from here.
Actually, I will say ongera to camel keepers because they are trying to do even without any support. Eh?
No support, yeah, very true.
Yes.
Excellent. Look forward to the next 40 years.
Sawa. Sawa, brother.
Sawa.
Eh.